Brian, how's it going?
Good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for carving out some time here. I've been going down a wormhole of antler collecting and iconic whitetails, and in 2003 you shot iconic whitetail, and the last couple conversations have been with antler collectors, and unfortunately, which we'll get into this, is you don't have the original of your deer because of what happened and it
Yep.
got stolen. But I want to, before we get into all that, I want to talk about that because I feel my most recent conversation with Jonathan York out of Ohio, he's an antler collector, and I said, "Is there like a code of ethics when it comes to antler collecting? Of like, is there a story to back it up?" And obviously, there's some people that are really passionate about collecting deer, like that's over your shoulder there.
Yep.
So it's been a fun wormhole for me, and I appreciate you hopping on here. But before we get too far into this, take a chance to introduce yourself, and excited to hear about everything that happened.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Like you said, my name is Brian Andrews, and live in Independence, Iowa, still where I shot the deer. So live here with my family. I got two little girls. They're 3.5 and 6 months. My wife Nikki. So yeah, living here and still hunting, and still I actually don't hunt the property where I shot that deer anymore. One of the I didn't ever own it, and one of the landowners that hunted, his grandson got older and started hunting, and he kind of wanted to hunt. So unfortunately, I don't get to hunt there anymore, but did until about 2 or 3 years ago. And I actually bought another farm up north of us a little bit here, so I've been doing a lot of hunting there. And
That's cool.
yep, so
Yeah, that's kind of a story as old as time in modern hunting, of losing access across the board. But obviously, you hunted. I mean, you got to hunt that farm for a long time, which is pretty
yeah,
cool.
oh yeah, I got to hunt it and my dad hunted it a long time before that. So yeah, we got our use out of it for sure. And I kind of wanted to get into my own stuff. We could buy some of our own stuff anyways. So
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, that's
pushed us along.
yeah, for sure. It opens up a whole new can of worms of projects and everything else that
Oh
I'm
yeah,
sure
yeah.
I'm sure you sat on that farm and thought of a million things you could do to it,
Oh yeah.
but you couldn't. But you didn't have to because you shot a ginormous deer off that farm when
Yep,
you were a young
thankfully,
kid.
yeah.
I did some research here leading up to this, and so I just kind of want to hear the origins of this ginormous deer. When did you guys first hear about it, and kind of like go from 2001 all the way up to I think it was November 12th is when you shot the deer. Is that
November 13th.
November
Yep.
13th? Okay.
November 13th. Yep. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
when did you guys first hear about this deer?
We first heard about or knew about it when, like I said, when my dad saw it 2 years previous when he was bow hunting, and kind of knew, it was a big deer. I mean, we never found the sheds that year, but I mean, like I said, he was guessing it was, 180, 200 maybe, big frame deer, you could just tell it, was a good deer. And he's seen it a couple times bow hunting, never got close, 200, 300 yards, and never really got an opportunity at it. So, and that would have been 2001 is when that was.
And so,
Yep.
real quick, so like for your dad to say it was a 180, 200, I mean, obviously that deer was probably 180, 200 in 2000.
Yep.
Was that an uncommon occurrence to see a deer that caliber? Because
yeah, I mean, there wasn't. I mean, there's always good deer in that area. I mean, you could always count on being a good one, and there's never, I wouldn't say there's ones like that all the time, but there's a lot of good deer in that area. It's kind of a big block of timber, and there's not much timber around it for miles, so they kind of congregate there. And yeah, actually, what was it, 4 years ago, I shot a 188 typical out of there too. So so there's some good deer in that area.
Yeah. And to kind of build this up for everyone, we live in a world where there's trail cameras. There's really not too many like unknown deer. And so to go way back to 2001, there really wasn't any trail cameras in use. It was all hearsay from the stand, driving around. And so I just want to give everyone a frame of reference of like 2001 was a different time.
Yeah, it was a different world back then for sure. Like you said, the trail cameras were basically non-existent. I mean, you had those giant ones, those game eyes. I mean, stuff that nothing like there is today, and that was basically unheard of. Is if you didn't see it, you didn't know the deer was there.
Yeah.
So he saw it, and I mean, we didn't really say much to anybody. And I mean, honest to God, there were some groups that shotgun hunted around there, but no one really kind of seriously bow hunted too much, and it wasn't really, kind of people had started to hear the buzz, that maybe there was a big deer in the area and you didn't really know. And then, so that year, no one got him. And then it was the next year, 2002, right before shotgun season, when my dad's friend that he worked with, they worked at the same place. And it's actually my mom's cousin. And he came to work 2 days before opening first season shotgun, which had been, roughly the first week of December. And he's like, "Oh, we got to go see this deer." I just saw it right off the road, right in this area where we saw him. And so they drove out there and it was in the field and they didn't see him. So they just kind of popped over the field and he was standing there with a doe. And yeah, that's what my dad said. He's like, he's like, you wouldn't believe it. And like I said, I personally never seen him yet.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, he's way bigger than last year even. And he's like, he was big last year and he's bigger yet. So yeah, that kind of got us all jacked up for, first season shotgun was 2 days away. And so, yeah, we went out that morning and went to that place, and there was me and my dad, and we set up, and he was wasn't too far away, honestly. I was kind of in a fence line in a tree stand, and he sat on the ground about 300-400 yards away, kind of overlooking another area of some crop ground. And yeah, right at daybreak, a little after, he saw him with a group of like 10 does. And he was in a field, and he was kind of just milling around, and then some other shooting started happening around, and they all busted and kind of were angling my way. And there was a kind of a 15-acre little timber that actually ended up shooting him in between us at the time where he saw him, and then they were running, and the does came running by me, and nothing with him. And about a half hour later, we'd only been sitting there 45 minutes. He came up, and I'm like, "What are you doing? Like, why you come up already?" And he's like, "Didn't you get him, or why didn't you shoot, or what was going on?" I'm like, "Well, I saw the does. I didn't see nothing." So he must have slipped in that timber. And
but pre cell phone, you can't just
yeah, that's exactly the same way too. Like, cell phones were just getting started then too, and so yeah, and that's why I thought it was weird. It wasn't even 45 minutes after daylight, and he was coming up to me. I'm like, "What are you?" And he didn't shoot or nothing. So I'm like, "What are you doing?" And yeah, he's like he couldn't take it. He said I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't know where he went because he's like he was only about 400 yards out in this field, and then they ran and they were angling right at me, and the does came right out in front of me. I mean, 40-50 yards, and there was just 10 does, and he must have been smart enough to stay in the thick that timber and kind of head up. And so then
So
like I said, to that point, I had still never seen the deer. So
yeah, wow. And so it's always fun to always ask yourself, whenever you kill any deer, right? It's fun to ask, how many times did this deer escape death? So like his death counter right there just went up another time. I know in that North American Whitetail article, he was out of bow range for your dad twice in 2001. And so the rest of gun season, did anyone hear or see him?
They second season that same year, I think another group of party that push and kind of do deer drives. They saw him about a mile and a half away in a little narrow fence line, but they pulled in they kind of just something you would never even think about running, but they pulled in to do it. And as soon as they pulled in, he said they didn't even get out of the truck, and he busted out of there. And and they didn't get a real good look at him, but like it's tough to say too. They said it was probably this one, and this type of deer. I mean, I would say that's kind of pretty unique. So most likely it was him, if we're talking about it. But other than that, no one really had a close call on him or anything that year that I had heard of, that there was starting to, like I said, it was starting to be more pieces put together. I mean, more people were knowing about him, but still you didn't really know how big he was, like you said, because you didn't have a good trail camera picture to look at, and no one had really got real close to him, to take a picture or anything yet. So
yeah, I can. Do you think throughout that period of time, was the legend of that deer building slowly, or was it still?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You could tell they were getting more, and it wasn't too crazy until, like I said, then after that shotgun season, then January turned to 2003, and that February or end of February, early March, that guy found the shed from that year, found the first side, and about probably a mile and a half from where I shot him. Not too far, but yeah, found that. He was putting in hydroson, just starting to do some field work for a guy, and found it just in an open field, just laying right out in the middle of an open field. So bean field, yeah.
Wow. And so once the first shed was found, did you guys hear about that pretty quick?
No, actually, no. I didn't hear about it until I didn't hear about it until that summer, to be honest, because the guy that found it really wasn't a deer hunter or nothing. I mean, he didn't really care. I mean, he knew it was a big one, but he didn't. Honestly, at the time, he didn't know what he had. And he had the big side. I mean, if you see, he had this side right here. The side with all the extra points and everything. And it was pretty similar that year before. So, yeah, it was I think it was almost a 128 or 130 inch side that year. I mean, that side. So it was one of the biggest sheds ever found, that side. And so, yeah. So then, no one had really heard about it. But then another farmer that I know, about 2 months later when he was planting, found the other side about another mile and a half a different way,
Oh
kind
wow.
of to the north in a kind of an open field too. There was a little sparse timber out there, but it was right in the field. And he found that about, 2.5. It was middle of May. And so like the left side was real good, but the right side had started to get bleached a little bit. Cause like I said, it sat for a few months out there and it wasn't, it wasn't fine. There's nothing that chewed on it, luckily, but
Yeah.
it was
Wow.
definitely more bleached.
So those sheds were would it be fair to assume those sheds were like 3 miles apart, like from left to right, or not quite?
From like, well, it'd probably be a triangle. If I shot him here, the
Mhm.
one shed was found here, and then the other
Okay.
one was found up here. Like if you did a
Okay.
triangle, it's probably
Yeah.
a mile and a half, 2 miles, mile and a half, and then
Okay.
it's kind of all about a mile and a half, 2 miles apart each one. So
Isn't that crazy
yeah,
that
yeah,
he carried one side just that far
that
away?
long. Yeah, yeah. And like I said, yeah, it wasn't. And like I said, though, it's a pretty open area. There's not a whole lot of timber around. I mean, there's one big square block that has a lot of timber, and then around it, it's just little sparse, fence lines, maybe a little slough here or there. So yeah, he had to travel, to get some cover, and I think that's kind of what the first one that they found. That one, I don't know why he was in that area because that was heading towards a major, 4-lane highway and everything, and it was there was no cover around until he got a ways. So I don't know what he was doing on that field, but
Yeah. Yeah. And so when the second shed was found in May, did you hear about that one, or did that one
yeah,
surface
nope,
later
I
too?
didn't. I actually didn't, and I knew that guy pretty good. I mean, we used to shoot archery league with him down in a small town, and we hadn't started that yet. But I didn't hear about it till the Cedar Rapids Gazette. It's kind of a major newspaper, for this Northeast Iowa, and they actually did an article about it. That they found them, and that's kind of once that hit everyone saw that. That's when everyone knew because they had the pictures of the antlers, and you could tell. I mean, like I said, those sheds scored like two. If you use the same spread as the year I shot him, they just scored bigger. They just scored 260.
Wow.
So yeah,
Wow. And
if you
so
use the same spread as he had the year I shot him, so
yeah, and you might even have a larger spread. Who knows?
yeah, you never know. So yeah, he was
Yeah.
actually a little bit bigger that year. So yeah,
Wow.
a little longer tines and just a little more. But I mean, he grew a few extra ones, but yeah, his tines were all longer the year before, which they're still long, obviously this year.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And
So
so, okay, so it's in the Gazette, the Cedar Rapids Gazette, and
yep.
then from the North American Whitetail article, I don't remember when that was published originally, but you had previously never bow hunted, and so was
Nope.
this the buck that you're like, I gotta bow hunt?
No, to be honest to God, I mean, like you said, this was. I mean, we knew about him there, but like you said, trail cameras weren't around, and they found him so far apart. It's like, well, good, you're never gonna.
Yeah.
And what are the chances? It's not like you have this thing pinned down. You have a 4-mile area to hunt. What are you gonna do? And I only had permission to hunt. I mean, I could have maybe got some other, but we had this little piece, and I kind of what drove me more to want to bow hunt was that was the year I turned 16 in Iowa. Once you turn 16, you can't youth hunt anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, I couldn't hunt in September, which is the last 2 weeks of September. So I had to wait all the way to gun season. So that's kind of what drove me to want to go bow hunt. And I had shot bow when I was younger and shot league with another guy and kind of just got out of it for a few years. And I didn't have my bow. I had a youth bow before and I never upgraded when I kind of got a little bigger. And so, yeah, it was about first week of October. I just kind of got a hunch. I'm like, kind of want to get back after it, And
Yeah.
so I borrowed a bow from my sister's boyfriend at the time, and it's her husband now, so he's my brother-in-law. But he had an old bow, and he let me borrow it, and I kind of shot it a few times, and got feeling pretty good with it. And yeah, I don't know. I think the first time I actually hunted that year was maybe the 10th of October or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Finally got out there and in the same area. This was the only area I was hunting at that point. But
And so this from the article, it seemed like it's like a CRP farm with maybe one little tiny chunk of woods.
It's crop. It's more where I hunt is actually crop, and then there's a little chunk of timber, probably 10, 15 acres, and then there's crops on both sides of it. But then on the back side of it, there's kind of a big CRP kind of pasture area and stuff. But yeah, and then to the north of it is a big block of timber, about a half a mile. That's not even a quarter mile. That's it's a pretty good substantial 150 acres of timber, and
So do you think if you pulled a bunch of different hunters and you said, hey, do you think you can kill a 250-inch whitetail off this farm? How many do you think would say like, no way, there's not enough cover. There's not enough this. There's not enough that.
And
it's not this.
like I said, it don't look like much, but if you get in there, and I think, what helps it a lot is it is the only cover for quite a few miles around. Like I said, you got to go a few miles in one. I mean, to the south, you don't have to go as far, But if you go north or something, I mean, you got to go 20 miles before you get to another big chunk of timber, like, I mean, it's pretty heavy ag country, and so and as long as you keep them in there, but I'm surprised, to be honest, because it was not a really heavy pressured area in the bow season, but shotgun, it's very heavy pressured, I mean, there's not a piece of it that doesn't get hunted. So
would you describe this farm as like the end of the road, like the dead end road, meaning the dead end being 20 miles of ag? Is that a good way to describe
yeah,
that?
I mean, kind of like that. Yeah. I mean, it's, for the most part, there's not much big timber, nothing you drive by and be like, oh man, I really want to hunt that. That looks like a good area to hunt,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying there's not deer there, but it just never somewhere you'd think and it's tough to hunt. I mean, those areas are tough to hunt because, the deer just don't really have a pattern. They kind of go wherever they want. And that makes for a tough area to hunt. So.
And so, I mean, you had the ability to hunt this farm for a really long time, and you killed a 188 off the same farm. Was that a similar November 12th, 13th date, or was that a different time?
November 20th, I actually shot him, and I had actually seen him two previous years too. By then I had trail cameras and stuff, so I had trail camera pictures of him from 2018 and 2019, and then I got him in 2020, and I kind of followed him, but he wasn't there a lot. I mean, he usually show up in the last week of October to first week of November, and then he'd stay for a few weeks, kind of the rut. And then as soon as that area started getting shotgun hunted, he would kind of just disappear. That deer did. But then I didn't know anybody that found any of the sheds off of that deer. And when I first saw him in 2018, I mean, he was maybe a 130, nice 8-pointer, good 8-pointer, nice. But, then the next year he was probably about a 170 10-pointer. I mean, he was nice. And then, but I didn't fear of anybody finding those. And then, and I actually hadn't even got a picture of him the year I shot him until I didn't at all, I guess. Cause I was coming home from work, same thing on this road and not far from where my dad's friend saw this big deer too, that back in 2002. And I was driving and all of a sudden I look over and he's standing right off the road about 30 yards just by himself. And this was what was this? That was a Thursday night. Yep, Thursday night. And I'm like, oh man, there he is. So I'm like, I knew he had to be in the area because it was probably maybe a half mile from where I hunted, like a stand. I mean, just to the east a little bit. So that kind of got me on him. And luckily I got out the next night, Friday night, and he came by.
How far from the tree where you killed the 2003 buck to the 2000?
Oh, probably not too far. I was kind of in the timber on this one, probably 300 yards, maybe 400.
I didn't know if it was like the same tree or something.
Yeah, not far at all. No,
yeah.
Just basically the fence line went to this tree and I was in another, there's a little, probably 2 or 3 acre chunk of timber. And I was just sitting on the edge of that one. And cause that's where I've been getting all the pictures. I mean, when I had the other trail camera pictures of them, that's where I got them all. So that's kind of where I figured I better focus on him. But I couldn't believe it when I hadn't had a picture of him. Then I seen him that Thursday and I got there Friday and
boom.
All of a sudden, about an hour into the hunt, I look over and he's about 150 yards to the north of me with some does standing in a little waterway. And luckily he came right up to me and he was kind of coming up the fence line and was going to kind of go back on me and go away. And he started kind of going away and I grunted real quick a couple times. And luckily he's turned on a dime. That deer turned on a dime and came right to my tree. He was another close shot. I shot him about 7-8 yards too. So
wow. Yeah. And so going back to your 16, so you got your driver's license and you're hunting with a bow. I mean, that's every young hunter has been in that boat and the excitement and a level of just being naive and hopeful probably too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
is part of it. And so, so you're hunting in October, and then I remember reading that you end up. Did you pass a really nice deer too, or did you not have an opportunity?
I've seen a couple nice ones. I seen a decent 8-pointer that, I mean, it was borderline at time. It had probably been one of the bigger deer I shot, to be honest. But I kind of was waiting. I'd seen another good 10-pointer, and I was in a fence line, and I just kept seeing these deer in this timber. Just in the timber a little ways, and that's where they all came. And that's when it was about the first week in November, I think, or right around the first. That's when I told my dad, I said, we got to get a stand in that timber. I said, that's where all the activity's at. And I said, this rut coming up, I said, that's, they're going to like that in the morning for sure, chasing does in there. And I said, that's where all the does were in there too. So luckily, he he got a stand moved in there. I didn't actually. I was actually. I don't know what I was doing. If I had some sporting event or something that night, or doing something in practice, and he actually moved the stand in there, and we hunted it a few times, and then yeah, I think it was the second time I hunted it. He hunted it a couple times in between, but yeah, second time I hunted it is when I shot him. So,
so did you guys think that deer was obviously the sheds were found, but was there any sightings or
no, not that, not by us. I had heard a couple people had saw him where they found the other side in May the year before. I heard a guy saw him really early, like the first week of October, was hunting up there, and there's a tiny little slough with 10 trees in it, hardly anything. And he was hunting that. And he said he saw him like the first week of October up there a couple times. And yeah, that's, only then another guy said he saw him, closer, maybe end of October, November, not far at all from where I shot him, maybe half a mile. But that other area was probably, like I said, 2 miles away from where I shot him.
Wow.
And so, but it wasn't, and ever at that time too, everyone was kind of keeping it. I mean, people knew about him, but no one another guy, the guy that saw him closer, half a mile, we knew each other. And I mean, weren't talking a lot, but if he saw him or something, we'd say something. And after the fact, after I shot him, there's, a lot more came out. Everyone, said, well, I saw him this, I saw him then. And that's when, that's when a lot more of it came out, but after I shot him then.
Yeah. And so let's talk about the day, let's talk about November 13th. You're in school, and I think this is a pretty neat part of the story. So tell us about the day of.
Yeah. So that day, I mean, that day is always, and from now on, I always like hunting that day. And it seems like that area out there is kind of a later rut. And, my dad worked for the county. He was the bridge foreman and kind of traveled the, rural roads a lot. And the day before, and even that day, the day before, he said he just seen a ton of deer, running, and said, rut was on pretty good, you could tell. So I told my mom that morning, I asked her, I'm like, hey, will you call, get me out an hour early. We got done with school at 3. And at that time, it was getting dark about 5:15, 5:30-ish, at that time after the daylight savings. And I said, get me out an hour early, 2, if I can get out there by 2:33, I'll get a good couple hours in. And I never heard from her. Like I said, this is before cell phones and everything. And she never called. And, I never heard that she was going to call. So I stayed at school the whole day till 3, and left. And I had to go. I just had a car, and I wanted to go get my dad's truck to go out and hunt because I kind of drove out in the field a little bit. So I went and picked that up, and he was at work, and he was there, and he's like, well, what are you doing? I thought you were getting out an hour ago. And I'm like, huh? She never called. And he's like, yeah, she told me she called. And somehow there was some miscommunication, and we never heard. So I had to stay the whole day, and which, in the end, it well worked out. But yeah, so I got out, got my stuff, ran home, and probably got out there about 3:45, 4. I mean, a lot later than I'd ever like to be, in there. But so.
And so you slip into this second time in that stand, and then
second time.
You mentioned you called in the 188, and when I'm reading that article, it sounds like you were bringing like the kitchen sink at this deer. I kind of want to just hear. You're in the stand. It's 3:45 or 4 o'clock, and you're like, I'm sure you're like, man, I wish I was in here sooner. And so, what was going on from then on?
Yeah. So as soon as I got in there too, as soon as I got in, got my stuff in there, and I actually, on the way in, I got to my tree, and I just had some doe urine stuff that I had, and I just put it around there's a trail that went right by the tree, and I just put it on there, and got up in the tree stand, and right away I started seeing deer. I mean, I saw a little spike buck chasing, and I seen does. I mean, they were using the area, and they were running. You could tell that the bucks were on them. None of the does were scared. They were wanting to be in that timber because it was kind of thick. Because they, if they were out in the open, the bucks would really be harassing them. So they were, cruising back and forth, and unfortunately, I didn't have like a bow hanger in that tree or anything, and I didn't have nothing, so I had to hang on to my bow that night. I forgot, and then. In the long run, again, I'm glad I did because, I'm sitting there and, I'd seen that little buck and another buck and some does running by, and I'd probably only been in there not even a half hour. And I heard a stick crack kind of behind me, and I, just kind of turned around slowly, and I look, and here he's about 30, 40 yards away, angling right at my tree with his nose to the ground. And, just coming right at me. But luckily, like you said, I didn't have my bow hanging. Luckily, I just had it because it was all I could do. By the time I stood up and turned and drew, he was at that 7 yards. That's when I grunted. By the time I stood up, turned around, drew, he was there, and I made a little grunt, and he stopped, and it was 7 yards. So.
Wow. And so when you saw him at 7 yards, when you went home, right? So you shot him at 7 yards, arrow went through, felt pretty good about the shot. When you went home, how did you describe that deer to your dad?
Well, actually, the funny part about it is, I shot him there, and I knew it was not. I didn't think it was. I knew it was back a little bit, but I knew it was a complete pass through. I knew because the arrow was there, and it was all. I could see blood on it, and I was like, maybe it's a touchback. I thought at worst, a liver shot, but I didn't think stomach or even anything like that. So I'm like, but I'll give him some time. And my dad he did a lot of refereeing, refed a lot of basketball games and stuff at that time, and that's what he was doing at the time. So I knew he was just doing like a middle school game or something at a town that was about not even 5 minutes away from where I was hunting. So I'm like, I'll just run there and see what where the game's at. And luckily it was at halftime or right before halftime. And so he sees me standing over there at halftime, and he comes over and he's like, "What?" I'm like, "I just shot him." I said, "I just shot that deer." And he goes, "Which one?" I said, "The big one." And at that point, I still didn't know how big he was.
Yeah.
I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "He just got points everywhere." Because that's what he's like. "How big is he? What is he?" I'm like, I said, "I don't know." He said he has points everywhere, and I said he's big. Because like I said, at that time, I didn't see him for a total of 15 seconds. By the time he came in, shot him, and ran away. So.
And so you think the shot's a little back. You don't know how big he is. You just know he's big. And so what did you guys do from there?
So so he's like, "Well, let me finish. I'm going to finish refereeing this basketball game."
How long a half was?
Yeah, it was only halftime. So he's like, "We'll go back out. I'll finish this. We'll go home. I'll change." And the funny part about that too is he's like, "I don't think I called a foul that entire second half of that game." He's like, "That's all I could think about was getting back out there."
Yeah.
So we he got done with that, and we went back out, and it was just me and him at first. We're like, "We'll come out, look real quick." And we got out there and kind of where the arrow was and started following the blood a little bit. And it was tough. There wasn't much blood. And so we're like, "Oh, let's go back. I'm going to get my mom and my sister and, get just a few more eyes so we can, see." And if we did find it, I, kind of wanted them there. And so we went back, and it was probably maybe 8, 9 o'clock at this point, and it was getting later, and we got out there and we looked and started finding some blood, and we kind of trailed them right to the edge of the timber. And then it went out to there was a pit cornfield, and he was kind of angling, and he was only going to angle across that cornfield for about 20 yards. And then he was going to jump into a cattle pasture that was, it was short grass. It was like your lawn or even shorter, there was just nothing there. And we got to the edge of the timber, and we kind of couldn't find blood for a while, and didn't know which way to go. And it was dark, and it was getting tough, and couldn't find it. And my sister kept saying, she's like, "I think it goes this way," or she thought she found something up there, but couldn't find it again. And so we're like, "We'll just back out, we'll come back in the morning when it's light, and it wasn't supposed to rain or nothing." So I'm like, we'll give him, and we knew, we were at the edge, and he had to go 400 or 500 yards to get to another timber unless he died out in that field, open. But so we went back that night. And the crazy part too is when we were leaving, we're just getting out of the timber and walking out, and all of a sudden there's a truck coming down in, and with some headlights, and we're like, "Oh God, what's this?" And because we didn't own the property, obviously, and we stopped, and we didn't really know. I didn't want to say much, and I'm like, "What's going on, guys?" And this was I think 10 o'clock, and they're like, "Oh, we're just out coon hunting," and and I'm like, "Well, could you kind of stay out of here tonight? This timber." I said, I shot this deer. I shot a deer in here. I didn't say how big, or anything. And I said, I'd rather have you not go in there. We left him. We blood trailed him to here. And they're like, "Well, we would gladly do that, but we lost our dog and we can't find him." The coon dog got away. And I'm like, "Oh man," like that's all I thought. I'm like, he got on that trail, and he's going to chase that deer, and that's going to be the end of it. We'll never find him now.
Yeah.
And so,
man,
that was a sleepless night, to say the least. So,
yeah, it's not bad enough you didn't find him, and then to have randomness.
To go back and all of it, like you said, it was a different world back then. Like if it happened now, like I don't even know what I'd do. and knowing, everything. Like I said, I knew he was big and everything, and I was, so new to, big deer. I mean, I'd shot a lot of deer, but never nothing that big. And,
Mhm.
I didn't know a whole lot about, that world of the stuff, that,
Yeah.
and it was nothing even then. Like you said, it was nothing like it is now,
Mhm.
with big deer. If this would happen now, I mean, everybody and their brother would be, trying to hunt that deer. It
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
it'd be a crazy deal. So, it was, it was a sleepless night, but like I said, I couldn't imagine doing it now. The anxiety would just be almost unbearable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so you probably slept for 20 minutes, got up the next
Yeah.
day. So did you have to skip school the next day?
Yep. So, well, we went out early because it got light early. So we got out there about 7. It was me and my dad, and then actually my mom's cousin, that friend my dad worked with, that saw him that year before, and he wanted to go too. So he's like, "Yeah, you can come out." And so it was us three, and my mom went back out that morning, and we got to the edge there, and we ended up finding kind of where he got out to the edge and went across that cornfield. We found some spots, and then we got where he got into that pasture. And then, I mean, we looked and looked for probably an hour, in just the one little area there where he jumped, and we could not find a speck of blood, to know which way, if he went straight or kind of angled. And luckily, it was kind of damp, and we seen the hoof prints. Like you could see where his hoof prints were because
Mhm.
it was damp, and we kind of were guessing, and we just followed those prints that we got on, those hoof prints that were indented in the ground, and we followed them, and it all the way across that cattle pasture, which was probably 200-300 yards maybe, and it got to the fence line, and there was actually a railroad tracks. There was a fence line, and then the railroad tracks was a big kind of, a 10 foot up, they had to go up it, and there was a barbed wire. And when he jumped that fence, there must have been a piece of something hanging out of him or something, and it caught. And then all of a sudden, like, it must have been blocking the exit hole, and then the blood just, like, it was like a long piece, I don't know, 10-12 inches of, like, something. And then from there, the blood trail was just like, you could just run. I mean,
Yeah.
it was pretty easy. But he still went probably another, probably 150 yards into that timber.
Mhm.
So yeah, we crossed over the tracks, and I actually was the last one to see him. My dad and my dad's friend were in the front, and they were kind of trailing, and I was in the back, and I had my bow, and I was just kind of making sure, he didn't cut off somewhere if they lost blood or something. But it was so easy. And then all of a sudden they saw him, and yeah, it was. Once I actually saw him, it was like he said, he was bigger than I even thought. I mean, I knew he was big, but I had no idea. And I never, like I said, I'd never seen those. I seen the pictures of those sheds in the in the paper, but I'd never actually physically held them, or seen, what they really looked like. So yeah.
So was it overjoy of emotions, or was it just like were you speechless, or what?
No, yeah, definitely speechless for sure. At first, like, just couldn't believe it. And like I said, I think my dad was more happy than me, rightfully so. But yeah, he just couldn't believe it either. And like he said, they all knew it, like that. Then they're like, "Yeah, that's definitely him." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I don't think there's too many other ones out here like that." So.
No, no. And so you shot him, and then like what happens? Because
So yeah, and like
2003.
you said, back to the different world. I mean, it was good, but there wasn't, like, Facebook wasn't really, wasn't around at all yet and stuff like that. So there was no, you really had your online chat. I don't even remember what the time it was. There was one thing that, like, you'd post deer pictures on. There was an Iowa deal or something, and somehow someone got a picture of it,
Mhm.
and that I'd sent around, or somebody took a picture of it somehow, and it got on that, and then, once it took probably, well, that locally, it didn't take long at all. I mean, because I went and showed a few people that day, and my good friends that I knew, and my dad's good friends that he hunted with a lot. And by that night, I mean, there was a solid. I mean, people were people were stopping all night. I mean, until midnight, people were still coming out. It was and I think it was a Friday night. Yeah, I think it was I think that was a Friday too when I found him. So
Mhm.
yeah, it was yeah, it was a pretty crazy time. It didn't take long for the word to to spread and everyone to come look at him. And so
Yeah,
yeah.
and so you got him scored, and then like, what are some of the accolades of the deer? I mean, because
Yeah, so that, I got him back, and we, took him to the taxidermist and everything, and I got him scored over by Dubuque, which is right on the Mississippi there, on the river.
Mhm.
And a guy over there scored him by the name of Buck Barney. And he had another guy, a Bob Monk, that they both scored him. And yeah, and we didn't know at the time, we rough scored him that night when we got him. And like I said, I'd never really scored a deer at that point. I mean, I've done it myself much, and we printed off the sheet, and we started doing it, and we came up with like 252 inches, and we're like, no, like that's a state record. Like, there's no possible way. Like, we added something twice, or did something wrong. And we're like, no, that's not right. So we never really went back to it at all. To be honest, we just knew we're like, well, it's gonna be what it is, and yeah, we had them score it and took it over there, and it ended up scoring 253. And at that point, we knew it beat the state record by about 13 inches at the time. I think it was 240 because the state record had been broke the previous year times. Like one guy broke it, and then that same year another guy shot a bigger one. And yeah, it was kind of a crazy 3-year stretch there for the state. It went, the state record went from like 220 to 250 in like 3 years. So, and there was a lot in between. There was 5 or 6 deer in between that scored, right there. And so, yeah.
And so, well, kudos to you guys for scoring that deer so close to an official score. That's pretty impressive.
There's no way it's right.
Yeah. And so when the taxidermy, or when it was scored by a Boone and Crockett scorer, and they're like, it's a state record, what was that like as a 16-year-old kid?
Yeah, that was kind of the, because we had thought, it was going to be close. And then once it was like that, it was, that was like, that really meant something. Then you knew what you had. And, it was just, I don't know to really explain how it felt, but yeah, it was good. And to know, and like I said, that's what I told my dad. I said, well, I guess we did know what we were doing. When he said 253, I'm like, we had 252. So yeah. But yeah, and by that point, there was, a lot of other people were calling, before they even knew. Cause people that, North American Whitetail and stuff, I think they could tell, just by the pictures of, that it was going to be fairly big. And so, but then once that came out, then yeah, there was a lot of other interest like that, North American Whitetail and stuff like that wanted to do, do stories on it, and newspapers and other magazines. I don't know. I can't even count how many it was, but
yeah. And so, I guess the unfortunate turn here is obviously, all the news rolls out. You had the deer mounted. It's at your house, and what happened?
Yeah, so we actually we got it mounted, and the taxidermist wasn't even completely done with it yet, because I don't know if you kind of see, it's on a pedestal. There's like a wood post, and it's got a base and everything, and he wanted to take it to the state competition that year too. So he was doing for his own deal. So he was taking a ton of time on it, but he got it good enough to take down to the Deer Classic. So we got it there, and did everything down there, and it won. It was the biggest deer down there that year, and won best of show and everything. And then we actually took it back to him when we got done with it, because he had to finish some more, and that would have been early March when that show was. So he had it for another, month or so. And then we took it to a few other shows, off and on that spring. There was some wildlife banquets and stuff. I can't count how many we went to, but quite a few. We were pretty much gone every weekend at something. And so we did that. And finally he got everything done and did it back. And I bet we didn't even have it in the house for 2-3 weeks, completed, when the day happened. But what happened was we farm and we raise sheep and everything for 4-H to show. And we have a guy there that shears our whole big flock, all our ewes, because we don't shear any of those. And once a year you shear those, and they were kind of big hunters from not too far away, and they asked about it. And I'm like, oh, when we get done here, we'll go over to the house and we'll check it out. And so we get done with the day, it was probably 3-4 o'clock, and go inside, and it was in the basement. And we go down there, and my parents' basement was kind of an L at the time. Like, it was long and then it L'd back, and you couldn't see around the corner, and that's where the deer was. Mm-hmm. And, they're with us, and we round the corner, and all of a sudden I look, and there's just nothing. It's just the pedestal, the top of the post. There's nothing there. And at the time we had a couple dogs in the house. And I thought, oh man, the dogs knocked it off, and I started looking around, and I realized it wasn't there. And, I can only imagine what they thought. Those guys are like, man, like the guys that would shear sheep are probably like, is this real? And then that's kind of when we're like, we knew, something happened. And, that was just it's in shock at that point still, be like, didn't know what happened, at the time. But
yeah. So it's literally as simple as you were gone and you came home.
Yep. So and then, at that point we started retracing kind of what we did the night before. And this was a Saturday, so that was a Friday night. I was there till like 3 or 4, probably. And then my parents, they were there, and then I left with a friend, and then they actually went down and golfed we have a golf course right down the road from us, about not even half a mile. And they went and golfed 9 holes. It probably took them an hour and a half at like 6 or so to like 7:30. And, we came back. And so they were, I mean, maybe on account of the house for 2 hours, that night. And then they were home the rest of the night. So it had to be in that section of time, and then I got home later after them, I was back home at 9 or 10. And so, yeah, so the 2-hour window sometime that they came in and I mean, the unfortunate part is we live on a dead end road, but we have a baseball complex for like youth baseball, like little league and stuff right across the road. And there's 4 fields there. So the summer there's always cars there. And I mean, sad part is you could sit over there real easy and watch the house and you'd never know, they could kind of watch you and see when you're leaving, and kind of know. So I'm assuming that's somewhat what happened, because to hit a 2-hour window like that when we're not home, you had to be watching somewhat.
So obviously there was some form of an investigation.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Yep, we called the sheriff's department right away because we knew, like this was a burglary. Somebody came in and took it, and so
that's all they took too. They just took the antler. They just took the deer. They didn't take anything else.
Yeah, they took the top, like basically from here up. They didn't know this thing has a post in it, and you just slide it off it. Like it's got a metal rod. You can just slide it off. They didn't know that, and they must have been rocking it, and they bent it over at a 90-degree angle, like not knowing that it just slid up and off. And so they must have sat there and worked a while to get it. And it's a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, metal bar. Like it would have taken some force. Yeah. I can't believe they didn't bust the horns right off the mount, to be honest, where they screwed them on. But yeah, so they just took that. And like I said, they walked by. I mean, at the time we had an open, like a gun, just a glass-faced gun case with, a couple Benelli shotguns in it. My dad had cash sitting on the table. Not a ton, but he had a few $100s. My mom was cleaning her wedding ring. Her diamond rings were sitting in a little bowl right beside this. I mean, they had to walk by all this, or somewhat to get by it. But yeah, that's the only thing they took out of the whole house. So yeah, we had the sheriff come out and they kind of did their investigation. And we think we found where they came in, a side door on the garage, because we never used it. And it was partially open. There's actually some stuff in front of it, and they had moved that aside. And because we noticed, like right away, they said we started looking around and. Like, yeah, well, they had to come in here. We never used this door. Like, this wouldn't have been us. Mm-hmm. And then we actually end up finding footprints in the backyard too, because we have kind of about a 5-acre area between us and the river. And there's a little hay field right on the edge of it. And then it kind of drops down, and it was muddy. It rained a couple days, a night before. And they ended up looking, we found footprints and ended up following them all the way down to the river. And they kind of went down into a county park. About a mile down the road from us is a county park if you follow the river. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they went down to the river, and then that's where the tracks went. And then we kind of followed them all the way up to where the county park road comes down into a river bottom, and they must have gotten a car there. And
that makes me sick.
Yeah, so that's what we're guessing. I mean, like I said, that's all. We don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that's what it was. It was real coincidence, because we know, like you said, none of us walked that path. And it was
right. Yeah. Wow. And so I saw Bass Pro offered a $5,000 gift card reward.
Yep. So yeah, we had kind of, we had done some stuff, and the sheriffs, put some stuff out, but we didn't put a reward out. And then, yeah, there's a guy by the name of Les Davenport did an article, did come across the story, after I got stolen, and wanted to do something. He got a hold of Bass Pro for, on my behalf, and kind of pushed, push this reward. And then we put, some money in. I think they put 5, and we offered another 5,000, so it was a 10,000 if you got anything. And so, and there was a few stuff that people thought, but, then after that, I don't know if you saw, like a lot of big deer in this area, within a 2-hour radius.
I did see that. It was like a whole string of.
Yeah. So there was a lot of, there was a 235 that got stole probably 2.5 hours away. And there was a 192 typical that wasn't even 20 minutes away from where we lived. And then another, there was probably 19, I think they came up with total that was stole, like in that kind of Iowa, in a 2-3 hour radius within like a month or two. So, I think there was definitely something going on.
Yeah. And so, like that feels like it's pretty organized, and obviously those people know where you live, where the deer are, and obviously never got caught.
Yeah.
And in today's if it would be, I feel like it'd be so much easier to catch these people, but unfortunately, 2003,
Yeah.
2004, like it wasn't as easy, obviously, to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
so there's a whole string, and what do you think happened? Like
Gosh, I
this
don't.
is
I
20 years.
yeah, you go through stuff in your head, and at the time I shot it, there was a lot of people that got real jealous of us stuff, and were accusing me of everything, and
Sure.
at first, I thought it was maybe a jealousy issue, just somebody's like that, you know, if I can't have it, you're not gonna have it, and
Yeah.
I knew some people that were pretty upset, and I actually had some, people accuse me that I went over and shot it on their ground, and it was so ridiculous, like 30 miles away. I'm like, and it'd be different if we didn't have the sheds. You know what I mean? I'm like, we have
Yeah.
the sheds. I shot them within 2 miles where the sheds were. You're talking an area that's 40 miles from where these sheds were found. Like, you're crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Where
So,
did you? I saw pictures where you had the sheds too. So were the sheds stolen, or where
nope,
are
nope.
those
So
today?
those guys, after it got stolen, those guys still had each side of it, and a guy by the name of Matt Beard. I don't know if you heard of him, you know him.
He just came up in every episode we've talked about
Yeah,
antler collecting. I sent him a message. I haven't heard back yet, but I want to
yeah.
talk. I'm guessing
But
he
yeah, I
hasn't.
know Matt real well. I haven't seen him for a few years. I haven't went to the Iowa Deer Classic for a few years now, but I always used to see him there because he was always there. But yeah, he kind of showed interest, and he basically said, he's like, if you can get these guys to sell me each side, he's like, I'll make a replica, of it for you. We'll have, Klaus,
Mhm.
with antlers by Klaus. He said, I'll have him put it together, make a skull plate for it. And so we kind of talked to the guys, and the one guy that stopped on the big side that wasn't a hunter, I mean, he didn't take no convincing to do that. So we got him to, sell right away, and Matt got that side bought. And then the other guy that was kind of on the other one, he was a hunter, and he kind of hawed around for a while on it because he wanted to kind of keep something, from the deer. He still had state record, but he ended up we just kind of left it be. I told him, this is what, he said he'd pay for it, and this is what, he kind of really wants it. If you want it, just let me know. And few months after that, we just kind of didn't hound him or nothing. And he came to us and said, yeah, I think, I think I'll sell it to him. I don't need it. I don't, if I ever want to see it, cause I said, well, I'm going to have a replica of it. If you ever want to see it, or anything, you can come look at it. So yeah, he got them bought, and yeah, so then I got a replica, and I actually have that mounted in my house too. I got a mount of that. So
Yeah. And so, I mean, what does your gut tell you? Like the string of 19 antlers, is that in some
yeah,
scumbag's basement?
that's what I think. Is either that or someone. If that was the case, if it was these people that got this one too, I don't know if they did that, they had to be doing it for money or selling them somewhere or doing something with them. And that's what you even had federal, fish and game guys come in, and talk to us and get some information, and they were investigating, in the area, and they said, like if that's the case, chances are it's probably going to show up someday, but it might be, it might be 30 years. It's somebody, you got to have somebody die or somebody, something happens, and but anymore, it's to be honest, I'm probably losing a little more hope because now with the way everything is, I mean, with the way the internet and technology is, I mean, you think by now someone would, but you never know. Like you said, that other buck just showed up out of nowhere after,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, like, to your point, if they all are tied together, then it's like number one, who was buying them off the black market, or is that dude,
Yeah.
whoever, like, more than likely it wasn't just one person either. Like,
Yeah, like I said, yeah, you had to have multiple people involved in it. So yeah, that's what. And if it, like that was the case, you think it would eventually show up. But like I said, with the way the day is now too, it's so I mean, it's a lot of people know about it now too. It'd be so hard to keep. But if if like you said, you just had it in your house or you had an office somewhere and you didn't know, or and I still believe there's people out there that might not know what it is even. I mean, if you don't follow along.
But like, what does your gut say? Like brass tacks, like. What do you think happened?
Since all the rest of them were, I don't. It's tough to tell. I go both ways because, like I said, you have all of them still in the same area. I'm thinking, yeah, they probably is it. But then the way they left the house and went down, by the river, I'm like, God, this has to be almost someone that knows the area because, like, it was not an easy route to follow to like get out of. I mean, you had to know kind of where you're at, and. But I mean, if you were, took your time and,
That's no
you could have,
thief. Yeah.
yeah, he said you could have taken your time, or done it before, and kind of planned it out, because like I said, people are on that river all the time too. People float down the river. And so, I mean, it's not like you're being, suspicious if you're not on the river or anything.
So you were saying that the path they traveled was not easy to navigate. And then,
yeah, and like I said, it went down into that county park, and there are some areas in that county park where if you went so far, you would get like kind of landlocked because it was river bottom, and if you went so far, you'd go in and then you'd have to come back, and like they took the perfect path to end up right out at the, right out where this road came down in, and it's tough, but like I said, it makes me think, maybe it was somebody locally that knew the area, but then like I said, if you took your time, if you were in the area for a few days, it wouldn't take much to figure it out, like I said, because that's a public park. It was kind of the perfect storm. We had a river there that a lot of people are on in the summer all the time. You have that public county park that people are in. You never, you would not be suspicious walking around in there.
Yeah.
There's people doing that.
Other
you got to
than
cross the road.
250, carrying a 250, carrying 250 inch deer.
Yeah, well, and the only thing good about the way this is it's all timber and you're along the river. So where they came out, I mean, no one would have seen them. They could have came out of the timber and they literally can jump in a car, like, where no one would see them at all. And yeah, it was.
And the crazy part is like you only had it for 2 weeks at your house, so it's like
they
had to be waiting.
Exact. I mean, it was off and on because, like I said, he kept working on it, but it wasn't more than a month, I bet, that we had it.
Yeah,
maybe a month, maybe a little over, because like I said, he kept working on it and because he wanted to do it, and so before we mounted it, he wouldn't even keep it at his house. So we actually kept it. My dad's friend was the president of a bank, and we kept it in the bank vault at town here because the guy said, he's like, I'm not keeping this at my house. He's like, I'll take it for as soon as I need to mount it on the deer, as soon as I need it. He's like, I'll do it and I'll have it for a few days and then you can come get it. He's like, I don't want it here any longer than that. So
yeah, I really hope that it resurfaces. Like and it might be 30 years from now, but I hope that.
And like I said, I don't care if it happens when I'm 60. I mean, as long as I get it back, I mean, it don't matter. I mean, I'd like it, it's obviously sooner than later, but as long as it comes back sometime when I'm alive, and I'd really like it if my dad, could be alive still. That would mean a ton to him, because I think he feels bad too, and so, but there's nothing he could have done to stop it. I mean, it was just
yeah, and along with all the other deer that were stolen, it's you just you wouldn't think that would happen.
And thankfully, like I said, I got that replica made, so that helps,
yeah, for sure. And so the replica, so they just had the measurements, the pictures, and so would you say it's really close? Like, can you pick anything up?
Yeah, so the guy, you probably heard him, obviously, Tom Sexton. One of the best in the country, in antler repair, and does all the bucks, does all that stuff, and he's the one that did it. And we had talked to, I don't know if you heard of Larry Huffman that used to run the Iowa deer class, and he was a big antler collector too, out of Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And he was the one that kind of, originally got the ball rolling. Because we had talked about it, and we never had it replicated or took it, and got the mold made before it got stole. So, it was basically nothing we could do. And then he started talking to Tom, and Tom said, yeah, I think I can do it. We had a ton of pictures because when we had to send in for Boone and Crockett, you had to take every angle, so we had, 30 angles of the deer, front, side, every angle you can imagine they made you take because it was going to have to go get panel scored. And I don't know when it was, a year later or something, they do it I can't remember how many years, with the top 5, has to get panel scored if it's going to be in the top 5. And at the time it was going to be in the top 5, in the world for bow. Mm-hmm. So, so we had all that, but so he did it, and actually that Larry Hoffman ended up being the one to pay for the replica to be made. We kind of talked and he said, no, I want to do this, I'll do, this is my, deal. I feel bad for you. So he's like, I'm going to pay for, the whole thing. And it was going to, Tom said, I don't know how long it'll take me. He's like, it might take me 2 years. It's going to be a process. And so he ended up doing it and Tom made it. And then when he got done with it, Tom said he's confident in his work. He said, if you get it back and you could ever tell the difference, he said, I didn't do my job. He said, you should be able to put these two side by side and you can't even tell the difference, or pick which one's which. So he's very confident in what he did. I believe it too. If you see it, and see it in person, you'd never know. I take it to the deer classic I did for a lot of years, even in the Hall of Fame, and you hear people just stand, you stand back and listen. They're like, "You must have got it back. Is that real or what's the,
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, so it's he knows what he's doing. I mean, the guy can. Yeah, it's crazy to think, like you said, he started from scratch and made that. And
That is
he's
really
confident enough
impressive.
that said you couldn't tell the difference between the real one. So
Yeah. Was there ever a point where you thought you were going to get it back, like from a lead, or like, or was
oh,
it just always hopeless?
there were some people that were like a half hour away that kind of involved in some stuff they had suspicious, and then there was some drug stuff with it, going on, and they kind of were waiting more on that. They had leads on some other wildlife violations and stuff, but they were kind of waiting. They wanted to get this other, the drug stuff more than that because they did that. And at that point, I kind of knew because they were only 20 minutes away from me and right outside of Waterloo. And so I thought, maybe that would make sense. There was a lot of deer stolen in Waterloo and this area. So I thought, oh, maybe they're going to, crack down and they're going to bust these guys. And they ended up busting them, but nothing ever came. They kind of hit them on the, the drug side of it more, and nothing ever came out of it from that way. So, and that's kind of, I'll be honest, that's the real last good lead we had on anything. I haven't had much of anything, in the last 10, 15 years to say, I'm confident that it's going to come back.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: if someone's listening that has the antler, would you if they brought you deer back, would you just say thank you for bringing my deer back, no questions asked?
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly, God probably would. And I'm not the type of person I don't hold it against, I realize people do some stupid stuff, and can change. But yeah, if I could get it back like that, it wouldn't bother me one bit. I let them go on their way, and I wouldn't press a charge. It'd be here. You drop it off here, I'll pick it up. I don't care. Whatever you want to do, I can. To get it back, it doesn't matter to me. I don't have to. I don't have to see somebody be charged with something for it. I mean, that in the long run, that doesn't mean nothing to me. Just having it back would mean a lot more.
Yeah. Man. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry you had to go through all of that. It's frustrating just like talking about it and like
And I mean, now older, I'm 37 now. At the time, I was 16 at the time. At the time, it was really tough, to think like it took
who
me a
would do
while.
that?
Like, why would someone do this? Especially I was only 6. I'm like, I was a kid at the time. I'm like, why would someone steal it from a kid? Like, it didn't make any sense to me. And
Yeah.
But
Well,
now that I know more and had done a lot more of life, I understand there's some there's some bad people out there, and
yeah. Well, now you have Ring doorbells. You have man.
No, yeah. Like now, like I said, my house now, I mean, they couldn't have got, I mean, I can't, no one, now that if they tried to steal even this replica now, they wouldn't get out of here. I mean, I'd have them on every camera you possibly, I'd have them 4 to 5 different times. So,
yeah. I don't know. Because it is. Where are those 19 deer? Like they're somewhere in
and like I said, none of them,
America.
not one of them has shown up. That's the only reason that I'm kind of like, not one. You think out of all those, something would have shown up somewhere.
So,
but then I don't, like I said, I don't get why someone would take that many just to not do anything with them. Because, like I said, it'd be different if it was one, like it was a jealousy thing. But like, obviously they were going after big deer. They weren't just taking like,
nice deer. Yeah.
they
They're taking the
nice
best
deer,
of the best. And so it's like, is it, who is either like who would steal those and keep them, or like were they commissioned to sell or to steal them for some guy that's crazy about antler? Like,
so I think it's got to be something like that. Maybe that. There's some money involved, and I would just think being that many, and not being related. It's not like it's a relatively close. We're talking, a 3-hour area, and there was not like it was a bunch just right here, within 10 minutes or anything like that. So
and that's the thing. Like for it to be that far apart, to do it all, to not get caught. And like, man, they had to be pretty darn sharp for
that's the other thing too. Like I said, they do that many times and not get away, or not get caught, and even like I said, it was crazy because like I said, it'd been tough to walk out to our front door with it because like I said, we do live on a dead end road, but there's a golf course at the end of it. So the summer there's a lot of traffic. Like I said before, there's a wall diamond right across. It'd be looking a little suspicious walking out of the house with a, you think someone would see you, so they were smart. They went out the back, where no one could see them. And so.
Well, I hope that you get reunited with the deer you shot at some point. And I hope that whoever has this crazy collection gets this scent and can hear that you just want it back. And
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yep. That's all that matters to me. Like I said, and I don't care when it is. I mean, like I said, I'd much rather have it now. That'd be nice to
sure.
have it. But if it's another 20 years and I'm still alive, that's great too. As long as I can see it back, that'd be the biggest thing to me. Is
Yeah.
just to have the original back. And
Yeah. Well, Brian, I appreciate you sharing the story and telling us the full scoop here. I mean, it's
yeah, that's
extremely
that's the other
impressive.
thing good to get the story out there. That I
Yeah.
like to. That's why I kind of thought it'd be a good idea to come on to. And you hear all this stuff, and you hear people talk and see stuff, and you're
Mhm.
like, yeah, it's so far from the truth. It's not even crazy, like right here. So it's nice to
Yeah.
get the story out there. And now again, and it's been a while since any articles came out about it. So it's good to
Yeah.
keep it, in people, so people know about it still, and
Yeah. Yeah.
just in case, on the chance of somebody seeing it.
Well, there's a good chance they'll see it. Whether they come forward or not, it's probably another question. But
Yeah.
we can keep our fingers crossed. And it's like one of the I asked the last guest, Jonathan York. I asked him like, what whitetail unsolved mystery would you like to solve? I know the answer to yours is who took your deer and where's it at.
Yeah.
But no. Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate it, Brian. If someone wants to get a hold of you for whatever reason, is there a good way to do that?
Oh yeah. They could. I mean, the best way would, if they have interest on that, would be to call the Buchanan County Sheriff's Department. I don't have the number actually with me right now, but it's in Independence, Iowa. It's Buchanan County Sheriff's Department. That'd be the best person because that's kind of where we've led everything else to this whole time. So if you have any leads, or if you have something, they can definitely get the information to me. If you get it to them, and so that's what I would recommend if anybody has any information on it or anything like that. So
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I look forward to the day when you get your deer back.
yeah, me too. Hope it's sooner than later.
Fingers crossed, man. That's yeah, I hope that happens. I think it will happen over some course of time, but
Yeah.
it's hard to say, or we might be both dead and it'll be some crazy story 100 years from now.
Yeah, maybe my kids will have it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's possible. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. Good being here. Thanks for having me.